are you interested in hearing about? Or what specific route are you interested in learning more about? If you're looking for Roxbury, I would recommend room 3, or if you have any additional questions about it, you can exit the breakout room that we're in and rejoin the main room, and we have staff there able to direct you to the correct location. Okay. Excellent. I am going to go ahead and get started, if that's okay with everyone. It looks like we have a good number of participants here. Really happy to have you all joining us this evening, going over some of the changes we've made to the bus network redesign network following, as Doug mentioned, a whole lot of feedback that we received from our draft map that we provided for public review this spring and summer. So without any further ado, I am going to go ahead and give you all an overview of what we are going to be looking at specifically in this breakout room this evening. So we are going to be looking at all of these routes listed here. So some of these routes we're actually bringing back in similar situation as we have them out there today. Those include the 60, the 74, and the 505. Again, I'll go into more details with these, but I want to just make sure you all know you're in the right room, or if you're in the wrong room, you can get to the right place. We'll be talking about the 53, 54, 59, and 61, where we've done some slight route changes, some new routes, the 56 and the 58 that we've added in, frequency or span adjustments on the 52, the 78, and the 504, and then some routes removed from proposal. I want to clarify on this because I saw it on the main screen and it made me jump a little bit. And we can talk about how this seems a little confusing. We are not removing the T70, which we had proposed to run from Waltham Center to Kendall Square. It's just the small part between Marketplace Drive and Waltham Square with other service in between. Okay. We also obviously have some routes that we heard great feedback on in our May proposal and haven't made any adjustments to. Those include the T57, the T70, the T71, the T73, the 75, and the 501. If you have any questions about those, of course, if we have time at the end, happy to answer any, but those have not changed since the draft map was published in May. Okay, so our first route is the 74. We heard a lot of great feedback from folks saying that it was really important to provide direct service from Belmont Center to Fresh Pond Parkway, as well as many of the social services or other facilities along Concord Avenue. So in our initial proposal in May, we had proposed to basically cover Concord Avenue with the 75 as it is today and with the 78 as it is today. So in this updated proposal, we're adding back the 74, but we're also proposing, like we proposed for the 75, to continue the 74 under the commuter rail bridge in Belmont Center and around Belmont Center. Again, we've heard from a lot of folks that ask, why can't we do this today? The reason is actually that the posted bridge height is too short. If we could change the lanes under the bridge to allow a bus to travel more in the middle of the arched bridge, we actually would ideally be able to get a bus underneath there and be able to serve Belmont Center again. So we'd be doing that with the 75 as well as the 74. And apologies, I see a few folks adding some comments into the chat right now, directly messaging me. You're welcome to also directly message Justin Antos, who's joining me from the MBTA today. I'm not going to be able to respond to all of your chats while I'm presenting, but we can absolutely go over some of your questions at the end as well. But Justin is a resource available to you all right now as well. He'll answer anything he is able to, or at least highlight it when we get to the question section. Okay. The 54. So the 54 is actually a new route that we had proposed under our May proposal. It was to travel between Arlington Center and Riverside. We got some feedback from folks concerned that this was an incredibly long route and they were worried about its reliability. So we've actually changed the routing slightly to avoid areas with high congestion, but also have shortened the routing. So in the northern half of the route between Arlington and Waverly Square, the only change is that we are using Pleasant Street between Waverly Square and Belmont instead of Waverly Street. We heard from folks who were concerned about the width of Waverly Street and some of the tight turns. So we've decided to utilize Pleasant Street instead. Folks on Waverly Street are still able to access that new Route 54 bus by using the pedestrian path located along that portion of Pleasant Street, or accessing it at Belmont Center or Waverly Square. I'll also note that we had proposed this be a medium frequency route running every 30 minutes or so. In our new proposal, because we had to accommodate a lot of other requests we got from folks, we've decided to move this to a 60-minute or better frequency route. Of course, we would be monitoring the ridership on this and demand once we implement it, and would adjust as necessary if we saw any crowding. Okay, and this shows the bottom portion of the Route 54. So as you can see, we are shortening it to Waltham Center. This will provide still a lot of great connections at Waltham Center to get to a lot of different places in the region. We have decided to basically cover the areas between Waltham Center and a Green Line connection with other routes that I'll go into later on. But rest assured that most of this area is still receiving service. It might just be going to a different Green Line stop or a different portion of Waltham. I will also mention here, you can see this little jog here right by Moody Street in Waltham Center. We had initially shown all service heading south from Waltham Center using Moody Street. Many of you all probably know that Moody Street is closed for a portion of the year for outdoor dining and pedestrian activity. So we have created a permanent routing for all of our routes that serve south of Waltham Center using Crescent Street and Maple Street instead. So instead of having to change the routing every few months, which I know can be confusing for folks, you know, a big goal of bus network redesign is to make things more legible and consistent, and this would provide that legibility and consistency for everyone. Okay, the main attraction here in Waltham, if I do say so myself, is the T70, which is a version of the 70 we have today, which runs from Waltham Center to Kendall MIT. It is a high frequency route, the first high frequency route we have to serve Waltham in a very long time, if not forever. That means that it would be running every 15 minutes or better, 7 days a week from 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. That's super excited for the city of Waltham. We're excited to be offering this proposal, especially because, you know, we've seen ridership on the Route 70 be really stable during COVID. Obviously, these are folks that need this route. We want to provide them with some good service. So we got a lot of questions when we proposed the May route, what the 70 was. You can see on my screen here, it was this little green guy that went from Marketplace Drive to Waltham Center. And agreed, it's super confusing because it wasn't connected to the 70. We heard that feedback that it was confusing, that the T70 and the 70 were different. And instead we've changed the routing to create the 70 being a standalone, sorry, the T70 being a standalone route to Waltham Center, and having the service between Marketplace Drive and Waltham Center served by two different routes who would then be able to connect to the 70. So these two routes are new to this network. The first one is the 56 on the left and the 58 on the right. So as you can see, we have both of them serving that Crescent Street and Maple Street. And then we have service on the 56, essentially doing what I believe it's the 556 does today. And then service on the 58 doing what the 554 and the 553 do today. So this service would then terminate at Watertown Square, Watertown Yard, and would provide also local service on Washington Street. So in our May map, we had proposed to actually extend the Route 61 and essentially provide service through Southside Waltham and portions of West Newton and Newtonville. Instead, we're having that served by these two routes. So this just gives you a side-by-side. This is the Route 61 we proposed in May, and this is the 56 we proposed in this current network that we're proposing as the bus network redesign network. In turn, the 61 has been shortened. Again, we heard feedback from folks that it was a very long route, concerned about reliability. So instead, we've actually done the same thing in North Waltham, but then at Totten Pond Road, where we have very limited stop options with no accessible crossings or sidewalks, we've actually decided to put the route on 2nd Street and Bear Hill Road, which is this area right here. It was formerly served by the Route 170, but does not have service today. And then it would terminate at Marketplace Drive. Now, this is a little tricky. This isn't something that is entirely common in our system today, but the intention here is to run this Route 61 to be through routed with the Route 58. So through routing is when a bus runs a specific route, hits its endpoint or layover location, the operator gets out, grabs a cup of coffee or stretches their legs, and then at the scheduled start for the other routes, say in this case, the Route 58, that same bus would be traveling that route. So say you lived in North Waltham and you wanted to get to, say, Newtonville, you could actually use the same bus to get there. It would just pause briefly at Marketplace Drive for the layover and begin that Route 58 trip a few minutes later. The same thing here would occur with the Route 53. So the Route 53, we had initially terminating in Waltham Center. Instead, it would be terminating in Marketplace Drive. But it would be through routed with the Route 56, again, to provide that connection over to Washington Street, Watertown Yard. But we also did provide a few other changes on the Route 53 as well. The first one is that we created or reverted our routing, this is what the 553 does today, around Boston Children's Waltham, the hospital there, to provide a direct connection, especially because there's quite a hill there and it's not something we want folks to have to climb. We also in Newton provided service at Woodland Station instead of Riverside. This is due to some feedback from Newton that Grove Street might not be the best place to have our buses. It's very narrow and very congested. So instead we're going to Woodland Station, which also provides a great connection to Newton Wellesley Hospital, which we heard was a big destination for folks and they were hoping to reach it in a more direct way. So another change we made is with the 505. So we had proposed the 505 be essentially a local bus making local stops between Waltham Center and Newton Corner in our May proposal. We heard from folks that having the 505 be more express and use the Mass Pike for a larger portion of its route was really desirable. So we actually took it off of Washington Street, except for south of the Mass Pike, and then had it get onto the Mass Pike. So instead, service on Washington Street north of the Mass Pike would be served by the new Route 58 and the new Route 56. We also changed the routing near Auburndale and West Newton back to the routing that it has today. I will note that the Route 505 will be serving Copley and downtown, as all Newton Express buses will in this current proposal. Obviously, we will keep track of ridership and make sure that that continues to be the best option for everyone. But as of now, that is the plan to serve Copley and downtown with the express buses, the 500 series buses. Okay. Route 59 has some small changes. We're essentially creating some better connectivity to Newtonville Station. We've heard conversations about potentially putting in dual platforms or having some accessibility improvements there, and we want to be able to provide a better bus connection there. We also have the bus going on Adams Street rather than Walnut Street per request of town staff, city staff. And then last but not least, the Route 60. So this was a proposal we were excited about, essentially extending the 60 from its endpoint at the Chestnut Hill Mall to Newton Center. We heard from folks that they were interested in it, but some of the other changes we made were less exciting to them and needed some adjustments, something like bringing back some more frequency on the 505 and creating more midday frequency on the 504. So instead, we have ended the 60 exactly where it is today at the Chestnut Hill Mall, not extending to Newton Center. So thank you all for bearing with me going over all of those changes. I'm happy to answer any questions now. There are some directions on the screen. If you can raise your hand or send a chat to myself or Justin, I will go ahead and allow you to unmute yourselves when I call on you. So if you just give me a moment,
Olivia, just FYI, during your presentation, I've fielded a couple of questions from the chat.
Sure.
If we wanna start there.
That sounds great.
Great. First was a question from Becky Pryor, who had a question about the routing of her commute in the Waltham Newton area to Fenway. Becky, now let me figure out which button to press here to open up your microphone.
And I'll also put our new interactive map on the screen as well for you all to view with me as I walk through some of these answers for you all.
Hi, this is Becky. I have a question. I commute from the River Street area of Waltham to sort of the Back Bay Fenway area, Mass Ave Boylston area, and it's a route that has always been a challenge since I have lived here. It has become more challenging with the service cuts to the 558. And I'm wondering how you would envision this in the new post 558 world where there's nothing running down River Street at all.
So just so I know what you're talking about, is it this portion of River Street right here in West Newton?
So it's River Street in Waltham that becomes Pleasant Street in Watertown.
Okay. We got a lot of river streets around here.
I know.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
this
a very
area right
also
here.
a lot of pleasant streets. Yeah. So this is
I know.
actually a pretty busy corridor in terms of businesses and residences, this River Street Pleasant area. And there are more and more large apartment complexes and lab buildings being built down this stretch.
Yeah, so great question. I cannot tell you the ideal commute just from looking at this and without knowing what time of day you're traveling and what your preferences are in terms of transferring. I think we will have a trip planner tool available on our website in the future for you to kind of make those specific queries. But I will say, from River Street, depending on what part you're on and what your ability is to travel on foot, there will still be plenty of options in Waltham to connect to downtown. It might be that a connection to the Green Line would be the most helpful for you, in which case there would be options to connect in downtown, such as in Copley, or you could, if you're interested, take the bus out on the 553 over to a connection Woodland Station.
All right, so the second question that we had that I fielded from the chat was about the routing of bus route 59. And I had a question from John in Newton. John, let me ask you to unmute here. Just a minute, let me find you.
I think I'm all set.
Oh, you got it, great.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, this was an interesting one, and David and Kostas and myself have talked about it. So John Pelletier, serve on the Transportation Advisory Committee for Newton. I also work at Harvard in our transportation department, so very familiar with the back end stuff in a lot of ways. So this one was interesting, and the change. I'm really concerned about bus operations on this one. The left turn from Washington onto Adams at a light that has a very short left turn phase across 2 lanes of additional traffic makes it very vehicle and actually very dangerous. There's usually a lot of crashes or near misses that have happened at that intersection, and it takes multiple times to get through there. And then secondly, the right turn from Adams onto Watertown, which is a route, which is a connection that the 558 does today, the bus often gets stuck there multiple times, waiting for vehicles to yield to it or move out of the turn lane. Of course, the left turn back is also hard because it's an unsignalized left. So, maybe there's some changes Newton can do, move some stop lines around. They can't add an additional turn lane, not enough room to do it. But I think what I was interested in hearing about was your point about the better connectivity to the commuter rail. And with those changes, so balances my initial real concerns here with that. So it sounds like, though, if we're focused on making this, have a better connection to the commuter rail, this might be one of a later changes, because obviously the commuter rail project it's kind of started. They're drilling in places, but obviously hasn't really gotten going yet. So do we have a timeline on this? What are you guys thinking about? Because this an interesting change with maybe some pluses, but I see a lot of negatives right now without some other changes.
Excellent question. I will say generally, there are definitely changes we need to make on our roadways and at our intersections and creating new bus stops, etc., to make bus network redesign a reality. So that's across our system. There are multiple changes we've identified that are definitely going to need to be addressed. It's possible that a slight intersection modification could be all it takes in order to make it more doable or safe option. But obviously we'll have to cross those bridges literally and figuratively when we get there. And if we determine that something is absolutely undoable or unsafe, of course we would then make adjustments accordingly. But we certainly expect to have to work with towns, cities, state, across this region in order to make accommodations for these new bus movements.
Thank you. My final comment is a very positive one. Super excited.
John, we
To
might have
see
lost.
the my wife and I are bus dependent. I'm on the bike, but my wife's bus dependent. She takes the 59 down to Needham, and seeing those additional connections opportunities to connect into Waltham, to have better connectivity to Newton Corner and Watertown Square is very, very exciting for me. So really, really good work. It's a lot of progress, a lot of work, but appreciate some changes here.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Miriam Cohen Franzen. I can ask you to unmute yourself if you have a question still.
Hi, thank you so much. I live in Waltham, just a few blocks west of Banks Square. I currently take the 70 from home all the way into work. So now it looks like I'll be taking the T70 to Waltham Square, and then from there catching either the 56 or the 58. And my question is, the 56 and the 58 are currently labeled as coming every 60 minutes or so. And I'm wondering, what would that look like during the normal rush hour times? Could it feasibly be maybe every 15 to 30 minutes? And do those two routes, since they will both go past where I need to go, are they sort of asynchronous, that if I miss the 56, that maybe the 58 will come around?
Great question. So our plan is to coordinate the 56 and the 58, which means if they have an hour frequency, you'd essentially have one come, at one time, one come 30 minutes later, and then the initial one coming an extra 30 minutes after that. So if they run every hour, you'd have a bus traveling in that direction, ideally every 30 minutes. Does that answer your question?
It does. Would it be maybe a little bit more frequent during rush hour, or probably not so much?
It's an excellent question. Obviously, we would be monitoring ridership in order to ensure that we're providing enough service for everyone. The every 60 minutes or better essentially means just that. If we need to make an adjustment and make it more frequent based on ridership, we absolutely will.
Okay, thank you so much. And we'll get sort of a heads up as to when those routes are going to start and when we'll have timings.
Absolutely. So again, implementation for this plan is 5 years long. It's going to take a while because, again, we have infrastructure improvements we have to make to many of our roadways. We need to build new stops, and we also need to hire a lot of bus operators. So there's going to be a robust public outreach before we do each phase. Again, there's going to be about 20% or so of the changes happening every summer over the next 5 years. So you will definitely know it's coming.
Thank you so very much.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we've got just from the chat here, Olivia, we've got James from Rep. Stanley's office who has a question about Trapello Road in Waltham.
Sure.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm James from Rep. Tom Stanley's office. And the representative wanted to inquire about access into Waltham, having the Trapello Road bus route, if that ended up being extended into Trapello Road into Waltham from Belmont. Just inquiring. I know we've received some constituent inquiries about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We were aware that some folks were interested in extending the 73 or another route on part of Trapello Road in Waltham. That's a comment we got after the May draft map was published. We did decide that with the available resources we had and the other asks we got from a lot of existing riders to make adjustments to some of the changes we had proposed for them, that was something that we could not add to the proposal at this time. So there's still a high frequency bus, the 73, that would serve up to Waverly Square. The 61 still would serve the portion of Trapello Road that it serves today, but the portion in the middle does not have service in this proposed network.
Okay, thank you, Olivia and Justin. Really appreciate your time and information. Looking forward to working together as well in the upcoming phases. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Like I said earlier, this is our bus network, so let's make it good. From the chat, we have a question from Ben Chase, who was unable to work the buttons on Zoom. So messaged me to speak. Ben.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having this. I just have a question regarding the 60. You had it before as being extended to, I believe it was Newton Center, and you had shortened it back. There's definitely one of the things that I really liked from that original proposal, which had the Western Green Line connection. And as this was like reverted, like there is no Green Line connection like west of Brookline. So like those from like you have like Newton Center and even like Chestnut Hill and the D branch are closer off. And would it be possibly helpful to like reintroduce that Western Green Line connection?
So you're referring to going back to the initial proposal to extending the 60 up to Newton Center?
Yes.
So again, we heard a lot from folks asking for additional changes to their network, things like adjusting the 505 or adding midday frequency on the 504. So this was something, that we did have to eliminate from our proposal. Keep in mind though that we plan on revising our bus network in the future as well. If this is something that is important to you all, I expect that bus network redesign will not be the last time for 20 years that we make adjustments to our service. I truly hope it's not. This is something that we need to continue to do to make sure that we're providing the best service we can for our changing region.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I think next we have Christopher Hammer who's got hand raised.
Go for it.
Yeah, just a quick question about the routes that you said would be through routed out Waltham. Is that every bus who runs one of those routes will automatically continue on to another one? Is it just a portion of those buses continue on? And then how is that communicated to riders, which buses continue, which don't?
Great question. I think, again, a goal of bus network redesign is to make our system more legible and consistent. A lot of the time right now, we have routes that do different things. Some of the time than it does do on other times, and it can be really frustrating for our riders. So I think we're going to do the best we possibly can to make it a consistent through routing. That doesn't necessarily mean that every single one at 1 a.m. at night when service is ending is going to continue through. But I think the intention is generally to provide that through routing, understanding that making those connections would be really useful for our riders. I'll also mention though that even if you do end up having to transfer to a different route, say you're going from the 61 to the 53 and still transferring at Marketplace Drive, it is a pretty comfortable transfer location. You have the opportunity to stop in to Market Basket, grab a soft serve ice cream cone or a cup of coffee while you wait. So we're hoping that that is a comfortable transfer location for our customers as well.
Thanks. Next, David Casas.
Hi, thanks for this presentation. One of my concerns that I still have is about the buses seeming that they no longer circulate around Newton Corner. It's really hard to cross Newton Corner from the north side stop to the south side stop, which are the biggest bus stops we have in Newton. There's safety concerns crossing, especially at night. And for example, it's hard to tell, but it seems like the 504, which, coming back from Boston, heading outbound, right now, as an example, it continues around Newton Corner. It stops at the north stop, the south stop. It seems like, the bus is just not even going to go to Newton Corner anymore. It's just going to go up to Watertown, sort of skip our major stops, which I think is very troubling. Is that what the thought is right now, or is there is this sort of like considered a detail that will be looked at more carefully at some point in the next couple of years? Thank you.
Great question. You know, ideally, of course, I think we could all agree the pedestrian experience around there could certainly use some improvement. I would long-term love to see that be a reality, so our service doesn't have to make an accommodation for it. But in the short term, our intention is to serve both sides of the rotary with at least one of the 501 and the 504 at all times. So if the 504 is running midday and the 501 is not, it would be looping around. But in the case where both of them are running, it might be that just one of them serves one side at a time. Does that make sense?
Well, not really to me.
Okay.
I think that if the whole idea is to make it clearer for the rider, if we're now saying that sometimes the bus is going to go to Newton Corner and sometimes it's not, I don't that complies with your basic, I don't know. And it seems like we're just reducing service on the 504. We're sort of cutting the midday service that we have now and the weekend service, and we're not going to Newton Corner at all times. So, you know, maybe we can continue to talk about that.
Absolutely. Let's continue to talk about it. I will note that the 504 in our proposal does have at least some midday service. Our initial proposal had been to be a peak only route and now has service midday. But yes, absolutely. This is the kind of thing that will need to get ironed out. You know, our network is large and we still have many details to iron out like this. This is a great blueprint for us to work with as we begin our 5-year implementation. Is there anyone else? I do think they're going to send us back relatively soon, but I'm happy to answer any lingering questions while we're still here.
I had one final one, Olivia. Thoughts on the 52 for that Sunday service? It's John Peltier. I know it's kind of been brought back. I know the 52 is kind of one of those routes that's always teetering on whether it even exists. It's an interesting route. Obviously, it's got the route deviation. I think that reducing a couple of years ago when you removed some of those deviations, I think has helped a lot. But definitely concerned on that one on the weekends. What is that looking like? What are some of the, you know, I certainly get it. You know, weekday we had to pare that 60 back. You know, we have to serve other things. Weekends, you got plenty of vehicles sitting around, and I guess it's, you know, drivers, but there are more vehicles on the weekend. You know, why are we seeing this cut back even more on that weekend when we just got it back?
Yeah, great question. It's possible, again, you know, if we identify that this is a place where we truly need weekend service, once we implement this change, you know, we'll be monitoring feedback from folks throughout this process. Again, it's a matter of identifying, you know, what resources we have across a 7-day week and where we need to provide those resources to best serve as many folks as we possibly can. But we are aware that, you know, creating the 52 as just a weekday route is disappointing for some riders for sure.
And very good. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, looks like we're being kicked out in 45 seconds. So I'd just like to thank you all so much for joining us today. Thanks so much to Justin for helping moderate the chat. And we appreciate your time spending this evening with us.
Thanks, everybody. Bonnie, I see your hand raised. Unfortunately, I'm not sure we'll be able to do you justice in 18 seconds here. I apologize. I don't control the breakout rooms.
I saw that originally was 50 something seconds, so I was hoping to put in a comment that it seems like you've made a lot of changes to the 54 based on